13 is a very long time. It's a very lucky number. And I am very lucky today because I was looking for somebody really great to perhaps have an interview with me where they'd talk to me about how long I've been in the space. And so I looked at all the great interviewers in esports, and none of them were available. Many of them don't like me. And so I've got Drew here to interview me. He does, what do you do?
I edit videos, I shoot videos, I produce videos, I act, and I'm a very close friend of Travis Gafford.
At least one of those things is correct.
So today I'm going to be conducting an interview with Travis Gafford, my mentor, boss, best friend. And I just thought I've got a couple questions here. If I'm on my phone, just know that's what I'm doing. I'm not texting. Okay. Travis gets upset at me when I use my phone when I'm working for him.
Normally we have a locker at the front of the apartment that he puts that in, and then I know the code to unlock it.
And I don't know the code, and
right.
He locks it away. And sometimes at the end of the day, if I don't do good enough, he's like, you can get your phone back next time I see you.
Yes.
I'm just gonna start out and ask some questions for Travis, because you have been in the scene, I think, the longest out of anyone else I know. Right?
Well, so technically you know Kobe, and Kobe was probably around for about 6 months before me. And I'm trying to think of anybody else that you would know. There's got to be at least a couple other people, but that's probably about it, yeah.
A while ago, we did a piece of content that was Dinner With, that was sponsored by Grubhub.
Yes.
And that was fun because you were interviewing a bunch of people who you had known in the industry for a long time.
Yes.
A lot of the people you had introduced into the industry.
It was also fun because I made money with that video, and with this one I will lose money.
All right, on to a kind of a happier, I'm gonna go into the past, okay?
Yeah.
Because the future and the present seem to be very stressful. No one seems to be happy.
Very accurate.
So I wanted to go back, I want to go all the way back 13 years, maybe even back further. I wanted to know, like, when did you first hear about esports, and when were you like, oh, that's actually something that maybe I want to contribute to?
Yeah, so I heard about esports long before I was in a position to contribute to it, because I think the first time I'd really become aware of esports was back when I was playing like StarCraft, Brood War, and Warcraft 3, and I heard about Boxer, who was a very famous Korean player who was competing in StarCraft tournaments, and you could download like a replay file for the game, and then you could also download an MP3, and you would sync these things up where you have the audio ready to go, and you would hit play in the game client, and then you would also hit play on the MP3 at the same time, and then the commentary would start. And I don't think that this was something I was doing with the Boxer stuff, but it did eventually become a thing with Warcraft 3. In fact, Freak did a bunch of these things for Warcraft 3 replays. And so this was like kind of the beginning of my understanding of esports. But it wasn't really until after I graduated from college and Peter was living with me that I was like, oh, maybe I could do something cool in esports. I'd do a show as a means of trying to get a job at a video game company. Because like, it was not even a thing where I thought like, oh, this is a career, because there wasn't really a lot of careers in the space at the time. It was more like, I want to work at a game company. I need to have something besides my degree to talk about whenever I get into interviews with companies. And so I was just like, oh, you know what, I'll start my show, which was inspired by a StarCraft 2 esports show that I was watching called State of the Game. So I created State of the League, for those that are familiar with like the SOTL moniker or whatever.
What did you major in college?
I was a communication studies major, and I graduated from Long Beach State.
And you wanted to just work at a gaming company?
Yeah.
What did you specifically want to do?
So I went into college expecting to be, it's funny because I think I'm going to do a members only video. People were asking for a video. It's like what I would do if I wasn't in esports. So this is a teaser for that, I guess. But I went into college expecting to be a lobbyist, and thought that I would probably get into politics, not as like a candidate or anything like that, but working behind the scenes to try to advocate for things that I believed in, which is funny because I feel like I end up doing a lot of that in esports now. And then playing a ton of video games through college, I had this assumption that there was not a place for me in the video game industry, because I was like, okay, I'm not a programmer, I'm not an artist, I don't know, I don't think game design is something I could do. Like, I just did not feel as though there was a role for me. I eventually learned about producers who work in the games industry, not necessarily video producers, but producers working sort of to project manage a lot of the aspects of video game creation. And so I thought I would get into gaming through that. Yeah, I thought I would go be a producer. Applied for a job at Riot, did not get it. Did 3 weeks of Q&A on Call of Duty Modern Warfare 1, I think it was. I'd have to check whenever that game was coming out. As I was starting my show, realized that we were going to go into crazy crunch where I'd be working like 60 or 70 hour weeks. And so quit that job and just went and found a part-time job so I could continue doing content creation.
Wait, so you didn't want to be, or I guess you didn't think of yourself as a content creator in the beginning.
Yeah.
And then was there a point in which you were like, this is actually what I want to do?
Yeah, so I knew that I liked creating content online. You know, like as when I was younger, I would learn HTML to try to like figure out how to make web pages. And I'd certainly done writing and that type of stuff, and even had been fascinated with like cameras and technology for a while. I did not think like, oh, I will become a personality. I more thought like, oh, I can cover this. You know, like following World of Warcraft, for instance, there was a ton of, and StarCraft, there were a ton of like community blogs and all that stuff. So I thought I would create stateoftheleague.com, which I eventually did, and I would update it. And this was right around the time that Surrender at 20 was also starting, for people that remember that website. Even then, I did not think that esports would be something that would be big enough that could sustain me. So I was like, oh, maybe I'll do a blog with like this podcast component covering the game. And this was at a time where like the game and esport were much more linked. And so I just thought like, oh, this will be the cohesive plan. The website ended up not generating money, and the esports started taking off, and I was finding a lot more success with the video content, and so that's the direction I pursued.
You now seem to be very knowledgeable about like sponsorships, deals, like representation. You seem to have a good spin on it, like to the point where you can like assist others with this process. How did you go about like learning about all of that?
So you're talking about like the business aspects of content creation. Yeah, so one, you know, I really had to figure out how to make money in the beginning, because I was spending a considerable amount of time doing this. I had a lot of college debt, and I was spending money by creating this content, even to the extent of like sending myself to PAX to cover like one of the first like domestic finals or whatever, pre-LCS. What was funny was that in the early days, I was sort of saying like, hey, if you donate, you can help fund the support of this. And I got a lot of pushback at the time, because people were like, oh, he's like begging for money, blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, look, if I want to do this stuff, people like the content. Like, there were not sponsors in the space. This is just how I have to try to pay my bills. Then you had Twitch subs start to take off. You had Patreon start to take off. You had all these like basically, you know, creator economy type concepts where people are able to have their audience directly fund their content creation and worry a lot less about sponsorship stuff. And so I kind of rapidly picked up on that. I did start doing a couple deals, like Own 3D TV, which was the early competitor to Twitch that I was streaming on before it went out of business. They were paying me, you know, maybe like, I think it was probably like $400 a month or something to stream exclusively on their channel after the show started to take off, and then after I started doing some other content on the live stream stuff. And so I started figuring all that out. And then I went to GameSpot. I learned a little bit more business there, because we were trying to figure out like, how do we make this site not fall apart? Then when I went to Yahoo after GameSpot, I was responsible. It was basically me and my friend Hunter who were running that business, and we were responsible for driving revenue, me running the content, him running the business side. And so that was really when I started to learn, okay, here's what sponsors are looking for. I mean, I would fly to New York and sit with the sales team and explain, okay, here's what esports is, here's the content we're making, here's how we can integrate brands. And so just being in those rooms and having conversations with like people running giant marketing arms at like Budweiser, for instance. And so that just really helped me understand like the big picture of sponsorship and all that.
So I want to ask, kind of because this is a bit of 13 years in review.
Yeah.
Right?
Review.
Yeah.
So I'm going to get a score at the end of this?
You'll be graded at the end of this. Yeah, I'll give you a grade. I was wondering, like, I want to talk like top things, like hits, greatest hits. Do you have like a favorite international event?
I do have one, and it's kind of selfish because it's like as much because of personal and professional reasons, but Worlds 2014, I don't think I will ever have a like international experience that feels as good as that. I was out of the country for 2 months. That was the Worlds where we went to Taipei and then to Singapore and then Korea afterwards, like Busan and Seoul. And so it was one of the few times where we have gone from dramatically different areas. You know, Europe travels along between the different countries, but I think it's a lot bigger whenever you're flying like across the equator essentially. So it was just a ton of fun. It was also the first time that Worlds went really big, because previously it had always been, I guess it was in Jönköping for the first one in Sweden. But then after that, it was in LA. So this was the first time where it was like, it really truly felt like an international event where we're switching all these different countries, we're doing all this stuff. And it was just a big period of time in my life where I was learning and growing a lot, and a lot of the experiences I had were great. I mean, Kobe and Shox and I all talk about that being like one of our favorite times. We would work all day and then go out to like a club at night, and I'm like suddenly clubbing in Korea, and it just felt very bizarre from where I had been essentially graduating from college just, 3 years before. And then the games and everything were super fun. Finals were amazing. That was where we had Imagine Dragons performing, and the games were amazing. And the storylines, that was also when North America still had hope. There was like the Kaboom game with Alliance where they, Alliance got upset in a really crazy way. So it was overall just a really great international experience.
At that time, were you traveling with a big crew? Did you have one person?
So I was working at GameSpot. GameSpot did not have much budget. And so I had basically been like, please let me go. I will, just give me a little bit of money and I'll figure it out. So for instance, in Singapore, I stayed in the same room as Kelby May, because he had his room paid for by Alliance or something, like whatever team he was working with at the time. I was like, okay, I'll save some cash on this because I don't have very much budget. And so I used a lot of my own money plus some of the budget they gave me to offset that. And I was always trying to find like very inexpensive hotels, and yeah, it was very scrappy. And it was just me for the most part until we got to Korea, where I had this guy named Sully who worked on game cribs for TSM, if people remember. We had to share a room for like 3 weeks, which was really rough. It was just like the budget was super tight and esports was just starting, and so this was the way that they did it.
Yeah. I will note, Travis has never made me share a room with him when we've traveled.
Yeah, once I went to Yahoo, and I think the industry also just sort of acknowledged that like it's not great to have people share rooms for long periods of time, especially on international trips.
Yeah.
And so I think that type of stuff, it just became a thing where I was like, I will probably not go to this event if it requires like room sharing. And I'm sure there's a lot of young people especially that watch this and are like scoffing at it, and I say young people, like people straight out of college that are like, well, I would just go stay in a hostel or something. It's just like, it's a very different experience whenever you are like working long days with somebody, you're trying to come back to your own space, you're trying to do your own thing. Like, it's just not good. So
yeah.
Well,
because I was right out of college when I started working with you.
Yeah.
I was still in college for the first like semester.
Yeah.
And then I remember it was funny because when I would go to a hotel room, I'd be like, oh my God, this is the coolest. I get my own hotel room. Like, I remember there was an elevator that was like, I think from your perspective, like kind of old and rickety.
Yes.
And from my perspective, I was like, this is so retro. Like, this is like insane.
Yeah, was that New York or no? No, I think that was when we went to probably like
a
summer,
Chicago.
spring finals. Yeah.
I think it was Chicago.
Yeah.
But I think it's funny to look back on it, because when you're in college, like you share a dorm room.
Yeah.
You share like a closet with people. So that's a huge upgrade to be like hotel room. But I also think after you've had so much more experience in the industry where you're like, this is kind of like expected, right?
Yeah, it's tough too, because I think a lot of the audience that watches my content might be in their early 20s, and I will try to convey to them the idea of like, okay, if I'm going to travel internationally, like we're trying to raise this much money, like from sponsors and maybe some like Twitch subs or something, and people go, that's so much money, and they will be like, I could go to Korea and fly like this dinky airline and stay in this little hostel and do all this stuff. And it's like, okay, yeah, I get that that's a possibility, but you're probably not grinding out all these like very long days. You're not carrying, sometimes like 10 grand worth of equipment with you. You don't need like really good internet because the venue internet is shit, and you need to get back and like get videos uploaded because they're all like out of date in 12 hours. So it's just like, it is sometimes difficult to convey the situation to people,
Yeah. And I think also because you need to not only break even,
Yes.
but like make money, hopefully.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And like, I want to make sure you get compensated, or anybody who's coming with us gets compensated, and like compensating somebody for 2 to 3 weeks of work, if you're going to some big international event, like we're talking about Worlds right now, and you asked me like, are we going or are you going?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I have to figure out in the next couple of weeks by talking to sponsors and seeing what's available. And it has to be a thing where it's like, okay, I have to think about how much it costs to be in Europe for however many weeks we're going to be there, how much it costs to pay you, how much it costs to like pay me, and yeah, hopefully make some money. Because the alternative is like, I just try to cover it from home. I spend no money, and like maybe I find a sponsor who's willing to just like sponsor, either remote coverage or me creating content during that time. And so it really is like a cost analysis, and like it is really fun to travel, and I do really like it. And being at these events is like one of my favorite parts of the job. But it is also, it's not a vacation. You are working a lot. Yeah.
And I think it's tough too, because it's a big investment of time and money, but like it feels like it's going to be worth it. But then if those interviews also like don't like pop off or something, then you're like, dang, I might have gotten the exact same, like from a sponsorship standpoint, the same views, like the same numbers.
Yeah, like if I was just doing a video at home reacting to like Team Liquid losing, that might be better than like if I do an angry interview with APA that's 2 minutes long that nobody watches, which is what I did last year in Korea. And so, it's just like the economics of it are difficult. And and you're really beholden to the YouTube algorithm. My audience is like super North American based. And so if North America's not doing well and Worlds is in the middle of the night for them, like, are they even tuning into this tournament? Do they even care if I'm doing an interview with like a player from the 3rd seeded like European team, on like a win that they had against like a Chinese team? It's just, it is difficult. It has become exceedingly difficult over time to like cover international events, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, bringing us back in,
Yes.
What is that?
Ringing it all together. Yeah.
Ringing it all together. Is it ringing it all together?
No, it's definitely not.
Bringing it all together, taking us back into the ring.
Yeah.
Going back to the national
domestic.
Domestic, there it is. Bringing us back to a domestic standpoint, viewpoint, perspective. I wanted to talk a bit about the LCS. Mm-hmm. Do you have like an all-time favorite player?
I mean, definitely Peter, Doublelift, because of like our experiences together, and I just feel like he was the main character of the LCS while he was in it. So I definitely think that, I get this question a lot, and people like say Doublelift doesn't count or whatever. Beyond him, I don't think I really have one. There are a lot of people who I really enjoyed interviewing and creating content with. I'll be honest that most of those people were in the past. Like I think we're getting like this reemergence of personality in the LCS after having a drought for a while with players like APA and JoJo. But I think there were a lot of players in the past who I loved creating content with. And I miss some of the more goofy stuff that I was able to do with those players that I think it's difficult to do now,
Do you have like a favorite? I know you were talking about players that you did interviews with. Do you have a specific interview that you were like, that was awesome? Oh my God, I think about that interview from time to time. Yeah,
so I did, after Peter finally won his first trophy, which was 2015, I think, Madison Square Garden. I did an interview with him it's very funny because it was an interview that I did where I was not on camera. And it was an hour-long interview that myself and my buddy Damian Estrada shot with him outside of the CLG house. And we really talked about like the path to him going up to this moment. And it's funny to think about now because like that was really recapping like 4 years of his career. but at the time it felt so long. Like he'd been expected to win so many years over and over again, and that had never happened. And like there was CLG had always been expected to perform better. He finally got this win. So we did this really in-depth interview with him and turned it into a like 3-part mini doc of like, I think the total runtime was probably like 40 minutes long, and we released it in 3 different pieces. We actually ended up pulling that down because of the family tragedy stuff that ended up happening with him, and I just wanted to like respect what was going on there. And so I was not working at GameSpot at the time, but I reached out to them and we were able to get a lot of the stuff pulled down because I didn't want the internet being weird about it. But I do think that that was like one of the better interviews that I have ever done, and the fact that we were able to transform it into this really cool piece of content, I think was really, really great.
Something that I've found while working with you, for you, I found that you have a way of kind of, you're almost like this, and I feel like you wouldn't know from watching content or observing the LCS, but you're kind of behind the scenes, almost like a spider connecting all these webs of people together, and like kind of.
I feel like spider has such a negative connotation.
Maybe.
I think maybe you just mean I'm like hyper connected within the space.
Yeah. You're maybe the glue. Travis Gafford is the glue that holds the LCS together. That's what I'll say. You're kind of the Elmer's glue. But yeah, you have brought a lot of people into this space. You've connected a lot of people within the space to each other.
Yeah.
Is that something that you always just like kind of felt like you wanted to do? Do you feel like you do that for like the betterment of the league, or is that like a personal thing?
Yeah, I think it's a couple things. One, I really do enjoy investing into people and seeing them find success, especially whenever I see the potential for that person to really go and do some really cool things. And so that has always been really neat. And similarly, I like having an understanding of like, it is easy for me to see 2 people who I think would work really well together or could do something really cool, or, oh, this person has this problem in their current situation. I know somebody who can help them out a ton. Like, it is fun to sort of plant the seeds and see the results of that. I think the other thing is like, I want the league and the community to be in a really healthy and good spot. And many times, the best way to do that is for me to bring issues up publicly, for me to advocate for things publicly, etc. Oftentimes, the best way for me to do that is to not do that, is to like have conversations privately about something, to meet with somebody over lunch and be like, hey, like, have you thought about this? Or here's something that I really think would be cool. And it's not even like a thing where I'm always pitching them. It's just like a back and forth conversation sometimes. And so that is oftentimes where when I feel strongly about something where I want to see change, or I think there's a really cool opportunity that has not been realized, it's like, okay, what is the best way for me to go about it? Is this in content, or is this in me like having these conversations behind the scenes? And so I think that is why it is easy for you working with me these past years to see like, oh, Travis will just go like talk to somebody for an hour about some issue that feels strongly, or he'll try to connect people. I also just really like community building. Like, this has been a big thing for me with the Magic group that I run for esports and gaming people, where like it's super fun to see all these people who don't normally talk to each other, because like esports is so like everybody's so siloed. Everybody's so siloed, and trying to like connect everybody, you know, people end up in teams, or they end up at Riot, or they end up at a specific developer. It's like one of the least connected industries that I think probably exists out there, especially in comparison to like the rest of the entertainment industry. And so I think trying to bring everybody together is kind of a healthy thing that, one, is good for people on a personal level, but I think also is good for the industry.
I came and I started working with you post 2020, so post pandemic, when we were kind of like, okay, restrictions are being lifted. We were still wearing masks and getting tested there, but I was like after the wave of COVID. Mm-hmm. So, do you think that there was more community like before then, and now it's less, or?
Yes, but I don't even know how much of that was COVID. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think there's been a couple things. A lot of the industry has aged, and so a lot of the sort of parties and mixers that used to be thrown, like just like team house parties, don't really exist as much anymore. There are not team houses, and then the space has just become more corporate. I think franchising, COVID, people growing up and having families in a lot of cases. There was, and then also just like an understanding that there was probably the way the industry behaved before was probably fairly immature from a like responsibility standpoint. And so a lot of that stuff, I think, pushed us into a more like esports is a career standpoint, and this is a industry standpoint. This is not a community of people who are all hanging out together and having a good time, even though I do think people still have a good time. And so I think that just changed kind of the nature and context of a lot of the ways that people behave in the space. And so I think I have tried to figure out a way to like, how can we safely skew back a little bit more to like, hey, we're all friends, let's hang out and let's do cool things and like restore some of that like community aspect of the space.
You talked a bit before about your MTG mixers.
Yes.
Is that what you call them?
Yeah.
Yeah. MTG mixers.
The MTG Esports and Gaming Group is kind of
MTG Esports and Gaming Group.
Yeah.
That's something that I've found has been really cool. I don't always make it to them. My bad.
Yeah.
But people do, and
Yes.
people are always showing up. Magic the Gathering for you. I know we've done a video about this before. Go ahead and click it. I'll put it somewhere.
Is that a thing you can do?
I'll put a picture of it.
Okay.
Either way, you'll see a video or a picture, probably a picture, and you go, oh, that's an interesting video. If I'm interested in more Travis Gafford, Travis Gafford, Magic the Gathering content about like the origins we talked about when you were first starting off with card games. But Magic the Gathering is relatively new to you.
Yeah.
And you've kind of brought it into the esports industry.
Yeah.
Fully by yourself and with the help of a couple friends?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people really enjoyed Magic for a while. A lot of people on esports have played Magic, and then this was kind of a big thing that I wanted to push. One, because I just wanted to play it, and so I wanted to have people to play it with. But also, once it started taking hold, I was like, oh, it is really cool to have like 50 people show up at 100 Thieves for like a new set release, and you have everybody from, this really nice person I was mentoring through UCSB's gaming program all the way to like, some esports team owner or something there. So that has definitely been something that I've enjoyed building. And like, it's not the only example of this. For a while, Kobe was going and playing at like an esports volleyball group, and I know some people play pickleball. Been trying to get into pickleball. But yes, this is kind of a new thing for me that I've really enjoyed investing into.
Well, I'm just going to ask you a couple rapid fire questions here.
Sure.
Just to get some opinions. Do you have a favorite movie?
Yeah, we're just going
I'm
into
just
these
going,
random things.
yeah.
My two favorite movies are Lost in Translation and Thank You for Smoking.
Okay. Do you have a favorite TV show?
I don't know if I have a favorite TV show. I really like The Newsroom back in the day. Did you ever watch that?
My dad did, and he told me about it, and I've seen some clips.
That's great. Love hearing that. I really, really like Barry. I think Barry's probably my favorite TV show from the past 5 years.
Yeah, I think I agree too.
Yeah.
Really, really like Barry. And then do you have a favorite book?
Ooh, I think it's probably the Stormlight Archive series, probably book 3. Oathbringer is probably my favorite book by Brandon Sanderson.
Nice.
Yeah.
And then do you have a favorite producer, editor?
Broden, Plett.
So I kind of walked into that one. Well, guys, thank you so much for watching. This has been Drew Fawcett interviews Travis Gafford for you guys.
There's no like final wrap up of like reflecting on 13 years.
So finally wrapping up,
That's fine. You already ended the video.
Reflecting on 13 years, are there any last, I guess, thoughts that you have, sentiments, anything that you really want to leave us with at the end of this amazing interview?
No.
And that is it. So thank you guys very much. Go ahead and click subscribe if you're not subscribed. Become a member today. Check out Travis Gafford's Instagram. That's this guy, @TravisGafford_. Thank you very much.